Hi everyone, my name is Sumaya and I'm currently going through a design challenge as I get interviews for product designer roles with different companies. And I'm really excited about this challenge because I get to choose one of three luxury brands and redesign their homepage or landing page and reinvent their architecture. And so this was kind of a takeaway challenge, and I have to present one Figma file to the company. And I got to choose which luxury brand I wanted to reinvent in terms of a design system, as well as the architecture of that brand and that homepage. So I wanted to get into it and share with you my design process for this design challenge. It took me about a day or two to figure out what brand I wanted to really focus on. I really love travel, so I chose Marriott and how to reinvent the Marriott homepage and their information architecture. But it also meant learning a lot about Marriott as a business and the business model as well. So I'm just going to share my screen to show you my Figma file, and then we can get into it. So in this first screen here, I wanted to gather context on Marriott. So what I did was I really looked into their business model and I wanted to understand how Marriott makes money because that kind of sets the tone for business goals. And then I wanted to translate those business goals into user goals and B2B goals as well as B2C goals. So what I learned about Marriott was really interesting. What I found that was Marriott does not actually own hotel locations. They actually own less than 1% of the hotels that they manage. But what they do is they work with hotel owners and their main source of revenue is franchise fees. So they get a percentage of room revenue from guests staying at each of their franchises. They also collect management fees and they manage hotel operations for owners, and then those owners pay them operational management fees and for access to Marriott's management systems and processes and operations. And Marriott also licenses their brand and their systems to these hotel owners. So that is the main way that they make their money. So from that, I wanted to kind of break down my assumptions on B2B and B2C goals that Marriott might have based on their current business model. So I'm guessing that Marriott would like to, from a B2C perspective, increase first-time Marriott guests and convert them into loyal members of the Marriott brand. And from a B2C perspective, they need to retain loyal Marriott guests and upsell them on more elements of the Marriott brand. So whether that's credit cards with point systems, e-commerce items from their different hotel brands, and hosting events like weddings or even business conferences, which gets me to the B2B side. So B2B, they really make revenue from B2Bs by hosting events for large stays such as work conferences, group travel conferences. And they, are getting also from a B2B perspective, getting more hotels onboarded into the Marriott brand. And so taking a look at Marriott websites today, you can see that, they really prioritize the B2C side of things. So they prioritized finding a destination and, trying to find hotels as well. And they, highlight different locations where their brands operate. And they also, provide information on their credit cards and their full brand of all their brands, all the brands that they work with or that they're a part of. So I think it's really interesting to kind of get that perspective on the business model before diving into how to improve their landing page and landing page architecture. I then started looking into both direct and indirect competitors. So Marriott's direct competitors that have similar business models to them include brands like Hyatt and Hilton, and a couple of other brands that you see here. But I also wanted to really think about the indirect competitors, the main one being Airbnb, where Airbnb also has a model where hosts are under the Airbnb brand, and Airbnb doesn't really own any properties. They really just provide that digital presence, and they've expanded to experiences and services as well. But they also really emphasize becoming a host, right? They have a supply demand side, just like how Marriott has a supply demand side, except instead of hosts, they work with hotel owners. So I think there's a lot to be learned from Airbnb. Airbnb makes their locations and their experience a lot more accessible in terms of their architecture. So even though Airbnb is more of an indirect competitor and doesn't have the same business model as Marriott, it's really worth it to take a look at how Airbnb organizes information on their platform. And so from that, I started to convert the business goals that I was noticing into user goals and site actions. So I had already mentioned these before, but Marriott would need to increase their first-time Marriott guests and convert them into loyal members of the Marriott brand from a business perspective. We need to understand from a user perspective and a site perspective, who are first-time Marriott guests? The brand seems to, and this is again an assumption I'm making, I'd obviously have to test all these assumptions with research, but the brand seems to cater to families and seasoned professionals. So I would say anyone between their mid-30s through their mid-50s. And these are folks who tend to have more disposable income for luxury vacations and travel experiences. But could they scale to new user segments like younger professional guests with less disposable incomes, similar to how Airbnb kind of makes it accessible? I remember when I just graduated college, my sister, cousins, and we backpacked through Europe for 2 months. And we stayed at really cheap hostels in Europe that were, 10 euros a night or 15 euros a night. And you can actually find those kinds of deals on Airbnb. And it made travel for us really accessible when we had very little disposable income to our names. And we met a lot of other young folks who, would work restaurant jobs and work internships to save up and pay for this sort of backpacking experience. And it was really fun to have. So I can, relate to travel from a more like a very, very affordable perspective. But as I have, matured, and this was 10 years ago that I backpacked. So as I've matured, I realized I really like certain comforts, right? I like having a bathroom and running water instead of camping sites. And so now I choose Airbnbs that provide certain amenities that are more central in their locations when I visit different cities and I want to travel. And so my tastes have changed now that I'm more in my 30s. So it's interesting to see how that works. And now I have more disposable income to spend for those types of locations. So from a B2C perspective, we also need to retain loyal Marriott guests and upsell them on more elements of the Marriott brand. So credit cards and their point systems, e-commerce items from the hotel brands, and hosting events like weddings. So how do we, from the website and user perspective, get returning customers to create an online account with Marriott to personalize their experience based on their stay history and provide credit card deals and points for Marriott guests who stay at least 1 to 3 times in a year or maybe a couple of years. And maybe there's, partnerships with airlines involved, as well as the credit card companies to offer more travel perks. From a B2B perspective, hosting events for large stays like work conferences and group travel. So how can we, from a B2B perspective, advertise conference and retreat amenities and packages for large groups and provide additional credit card and airline perks for group bookings via B2B companies for those types of conferences and retreats? And then finally, another goal that I sort of assumed was getting more hotels onboarded into the Marriott brand of hotels. So how might we create a join the Marriott portfolio and showcase Marriott's brands and help prospective hotel owners find the brand that best suits their hotel location and their budget. And it would be similar to Airbnb's Become a Host page. And then I added another goal here, considering localization for Marriott's top international locations so that the website is immersed in that culture, and partnering with international credit card companies or airlines for locale specific deals. So from the homepage that I was seeing, because I'm based in the US and I'm here in Philadelphia, I saw that Marriott was, highlighting a lot of their US-based locations. But I wonder if I was pulling up the Marriott site in France or Spain, would I be seeing locations in France or Spain being advertised? And so really thinking about those localization elements could really help them scale further internationally and from an international perspective. So with that, that was the context that I sort of gathered as I was learning about Marriott. And then I started to come up with flows. And as you can see, we're starting from a very broad scope, right? I wanted to kind of get that bird's eye view of Marriott and the business model and start to gradually narrow the scope down to just the homepage. And so you'll see that the scope is still pretty big at this point, but I'm still trying to narrow down the scope. So from the perspective of the website, I now wanted to dig deeper into site actions, and I wanted to create a current state workflow of what's happening on the Marriott site right now for both, first-time users or first-time guests, as well as returning users or returning guests. And then I wanted to consider a future state. So let's dig into the current state. And this was from just browsing their website and clicking into all the elements that they had on their website. So I'm just going to go to their website really quick. I basically clicked into every single navigation element and panel, and I started to learn more about the Marriott brand. And I realized that they were really hiding a lot of valuable information that could be resurfaced on the landing page. And so that is my challenge. And that's what I started to focus on as I started learning more about the Marriott information architecture. So for B2C first-time guests, maybe they discover Marriott through social media or a referral. I discovered Marriott through going to a wedding and having to stay at a Marriott location with other wedding guests. And then maybe they book a specific stay or for a specific location or weekend. They type in the location and duration of their stay into the Marriott site and are taken to a page to explore all hotels in that location. They select the location they must choose, and then they must choose a type of room that they would like to book. So a single versus a double bed, and then they're taken to a payment plan. They must select their payment plan before they're finally taken to a payment page where they input all their payment information. So this is quite a long 5-step process with multiple clicks involved to really get to the final room that they would like to book. And as someone who's a really loyal Airbnb user, it usually takes me just 2 clicks to get to the place I want to be and to book my stay on Airbnb. I search, I click into a couple of the apartments that I like, and then I just click book, right? And it's really easy, and Airbnb already has my payment information. So it's more of a 2 to 3 click process. For first-time Marriott guests for a conference or event, this is more the B2B example. You can actually, on the Marriott site, plan an event like a conference. So a first-time company user must input their location, dates, the number of guests, number of rooms needed, and the type of event that they are planning. And then they are taken to a landing page with multiple hotel options, and they can select up to 3 hotels to create an RFP. So essentially they can, depending on the size of what they're planning, they might need 3 hotel locations to house all their guests. And then they submit an event profile form with the 3 steps in it so that they can be contacted by a Marriott representative. And then there's the B2B hotel owner looking to become a part of Marriott's portfolio. In this case, Marriott has a brands page and they showcase the variety of brands that are under the Marriott, but they don't really necessarily say explicitly that this is for hotel owners or folks who are maybe developers or construction developers who are planning to build hotels. So I think that's interesting, and I'm curious to see why they choose to do what they do. And then for the returning guests, returning users can sign into their account and see their points and trip history and book new stays. So their returning account is kind of clunky to navigate. I re-logged back into an account from Marriott that I'd created over a year ago. And it was just, it wasn't as robust as my Airbnb account that I use on a regular basis. So with that, I started to think about future state options for first-time guests at Marriott as well as returning guests. So for the B2C use case, I wanted to emphasize hotel booking call to actions above the fold to be more pronounced and take up more space. I wanted to showcase education materials on Marriott's credit cards and point system and how to create an account with them. For B2B users, I wanted to emphasize the event form right on the front page and the home page. and really, make it easy for folks to book large group travel as well. And I also thought of, is it possible to advertise Marriott business credit cards for business travel? And would a company want to provide all their employees with a Marriott card? And then I thought a little bit about the hotel owner experience. So I wanted to create a Join Marriott's portfolio within the navigation for hotel owners and developers looking to be a part of Marriott's brand. And then, perhaps that takes them to a form to get in touch with a Marriott representative. So you can see the scope is still really big at this stage, and you'll see as I start to get into wireframes, I narrow the scope even further. And then I started to consider future state workflows for returning guests. So I started to think about personalized home pages with stays based on past trips. Airbnb does this for me. The moment I search for sale an apartment in Paris, I will see all these options for different areas within Paris. So they'll say, oh, would you like to stay near the Eiffel Tower? Here's 5 locations. Would you like to stay near the art museum, the Louvre? Here's 5 locations. Would you like to stay in Montmartre, the Artist Center? And here's 5 locations. And so they really divide it up based on location and tourism. And I think those kinds of categories to really categorize all their different stays within the Paris location, because there's hundreds of stays or hundreds of hosts to choose from, is really helpful to sort of narrow down what you're looking for. And so those personalized homepages would really help Marriott, I believe, as well, because when I log in to my Marriott account, I still get the same old homepage. I don't get a customized or personalized homepage. And I would also personalize upsells based on past trips and purchases with Marriott. And I would also, for a business perspective, I would want to create a business account or dashboard for conference planning, for managing employee credit cards, things like that. And again, thinking about that Join Marriott's portfolio within the navigation, showcasing hotel operation systems and hotel owners, so that hotel owners can consider how they want to engage with the Marriott brand or Marriott franchise. And that's probably going to lead to a separate website from an architecture perspective. So with that, I started to come up with wireframe concepts, considering more of the design system and different elements and tile considerations for the website. So here you can see that I really wanted to emphasize, being able to search for a location right away. And then I started to kind of play with the Marriott's existing style and brand to really modernize it a little bit more. There's a case study I read about Airbnb, and this was back when they first started, when they were part of the Y Combinator Accelerator. They were stuck. They had locations, hosts, and folks who wanted to stay at places for both the New York location and the San Francisco location when they first started. And they were just not growing in terms of their revenue until they realized that they weren't advertising the host locations well enough. And they invested in a professional photographer, and they really modernized the photography on their website. And just by modernizing the photography and teaching hosts how to stage their apartments, they were able to double their revenue within a couple months while they were a part of the Y Combinator Accelerator. One thing I noticed about the Marriott brand is it feels very outdated and it feels not very modern to me. And so I think investing in really thoughtful photography is going to really help them elevate their brand and brand presence. So as you can see, I started to come up with different tile systems to really prioritize different amounts of information in each section of the Marriott brand. So this might be, a way to prioritize both the checking in, but also 2 tiles that they would like to showcase. Maybe it's about becoming a card member or booking an all-inclusive family vacation and then clicking into explore options. Or maybe they'd like to prioritize 4 different elements right above the fold. And so this would be, booking their stay, but also, becoming a card member, all-inclusive vacations, plan your next company conference, or explore options for your wedding day. And as I started to build these, I realized, these are all highly different categories. So we needed to group similar categories together. And so I started to play with that in some of the more high fidelity versions as well. So you can see how even just including the right photography and just very minimalistic color elements, I use the Marriott peach color, really elevates this brand into more of a luxury presence in comparison to what exists on the website today. And I really enjoyed playing around with these different types of tiles. So, this was inspired by Netflix, but basically showcasing top 10 summer vacation getaways in the US and showcasing what those getaway locations are, because people really like crowdsourced information. They want to see where everyone else is going for their summer vacation. And so adding in those social components could really help Marriott. But I would want this to change from a localization perspective, right? So if I was in France or if I was in Spain, I would want to see the top summer vacation getaways for Europe or for France or for Spain, or whether it's continent specific or country specific. And then I also wanted to showcase Marriott's shop essentials. They have a lot of information on their website, and it's all really hidden behind different navigation elements. So I wanted to resurface some of what I was seeing in their navigation elements. And then for returning users, I wanted to start playing around with booking for me versus booking for an event. So if you click into booking for an event, the information that you have to put in will change, because you might have to talk about the number of rooms you want, or how many guests, or how many locations you want, things like that. So I started to play around with that. And I also wanted, before I kind of dive into my final concept, give you a tour of Marriott's brands. So from the homepage, you might not realize that you can actually, Marriott actually partners with airlines to give you that all-inclusive experience. So if you go into book, you can, think about hotel and flight packages, and you can actually see that you can book a room and flight, a room, flight, and car, or a room and car. So there's a lot of valuable information here that is just really hidden, and I think could be exposed more in the homepage. Even when we go into things like offers, even the word offers didn't make sense until I started seeing, oh, okay, shop Ritz-Carlton, which means I can actually shop their Ritz-Carlton bed or their bath and spa or their fragrances or their signature e-commerce brand items, right? So offers didn't make sense to me as a navigation title when I was first exploring. Brands, this shows all the different brands, but it's really hard to tell. It's just overwhelming, all this information. What do I do with this, right? So this is where we could reinvent the brand section to talk about, become a part of the Marriott portfolio, or here's the Marriott portfolio. And it could be like an indirect sales approach for prospective hotel owners and developers looking to join the Marriott brand. We have credit cards here. They have 4 credit cards. So they work with, I believe, Chase and American Express to provide credit card options. You can compare credit card options. Back when I was a UX consultant, I actually worked with Marriott and Chase to, help them with this element in their experience. And so it's interesting to kind of get back and rethink it again, like 5 or 10 years later. So yes, just kind of looking at their meeting and events. Again, I thought this was interesting for social events. The booking page becomes very different. So I have to input different types of information here when I need to plan my stay, like the number of guests and number of rooms, number of attendees. And so why not surface all of that on the homepage itself? So with that, I'm going to show you my final concept. And keep in mind that I had about a 1 weekend to do this. So there's still a lot I want to do with it. And it might take a whole year to do everything that I want to do with it. But I wanted to show kind of the difference between, the before and after. So this is the Marriott site as it exists today. And this is my concept, reimagining, refreshing their design system and refreshing their architecture in particular. So I'm just going to go into my concept. So you can see here, I've changed the navigation elements. It's either book an experience, shop by brand, and that's the e-commerce element on all their beds, their linens, things like that. Become a Marriott card member. That elevates the idea of getting a credit card with Marriott into something that's more of a luxury element. You're part of this luxury club. learn about Marriott, plan an event. And then I wanted to showcase join Marriott's portfolio of brands. And that's showcasing, more for the hotel owners and developers how to join the Marriott brand. And then this would, hamburger menu would showcase account login and things like that. I also surfaced a lot more elements here in the booking section. So you can either book for me, in which case you can book where you're going, your check-in and check-out dates, how many rooms you want, and what type of room you want. Or you can, I wanted to surface some of those all-inclusive deals or the group deals. So book a room in flight. If you clicked into book a room in flight, then you can also select flight information and your from destination and to destination, and this will change to reflect the book a room in flight. Or book an event, you have to book to tell us the number of attendees and the number of rooms that you need. So I wanted to surface that to showcase, just the number of possibilities that you can do with Marriott. I didn't want to surface every single possibility. Otherwise, this would have just been too long, but I wanted to showcase maybe the top three, just so that I wouldn't overwhelm users. And then I wanted to go right into a specific category. And this category is the types of stays with Marriott. So you could book a long stay for the summer. You could book your next company conference or retreat. You could book an all-inclusive family vacation, or you could explore options for your wedding day. So I wanted to really highlight scenarios where Marriott would shine and as a brand, and where Marriott would be probably the best option to consider. And that would help, first-time users in particular keep Marriott in mind for their big wedding day or a company conference or an all-inclusive family vacation or a long summer stay. And just kind of putting those scenarios in their head, especially if a first-time user navigates the homepage. And then I wanted to showcase the top 10 summer vacation getaways in the US. And again, this is social proof. It shows how popular Marriott is as a brand. And they can scroll through the top 10, or depending on their location, this would change. So if I was in France, I would want to see the top 10 summer vacation getaways in France or Spain. And then I also wanted to really highlight Marriott's credit card offerings and really highlight and elevate it as you're becoming a member of the Marriott Club. And obviously, this type of information would be reprioritized more above the fold and at the top of the page if this was a returning user, because a returning user has already stayed at Marriott multiple times and is now looking to become more committed to the Marriott brand. So by saying becoming a Marriott card member and talking about how they partner with Chase and American Express, and how you can earn points for your stays is really a great way to highlight the personal B2C use case. But I also wanted to start to highlight the B2B use case for a company that uses Marriott regularly, and maybe all their employees have Marriott credit cards for travel. Let's say it's a consulting company. So those are elements as well. And then I finally wanted to surface shopping Marriott essentials. Part of the Marriott experience is the fragrances, the bedding, the linens, the spa experience of staying at these hotels and having that elevated luxury presence delivered to your home. So really highlighting the fragrance, the spa, and how you can bring some of those luxury experiences into your own home is, I think, also a good way to expose a lot of their shop brands and their e-commerce side of things. So that is the Marriott homepage, really targeting the first-time user experience. I didn't have enough time, so kind of for my next steps, if I had more time, I would want to build a returning user landing page to showcase elements where, it says, welcome back, Samaya, and it kind of knows what I'm looking for based on my searches, based on my social media, based on how connected all my information is. And it might prioritize me becoming a more committed member of the Marriott brand. Maybe if I'm someone who spends most of my times at, the Fairfield Inn and Suites, which is more of their like mid-tier hotels, maybe they start to push me as a member, once I become a member, to go for some of the more luxury experiences, like the Ritz-Carlton, right? That's the ultimate luxury experience. And maybe it's about showing, folks how to work their way up as a Marriott member into some of those more luxury experiences. What I still am kind of playing around with, and this is where I'm still stuck, is figuring out how to highlight the Marriott brands of companies, right? So there's the longer stays, there's the select, there's the premium, and there's luxury. So how do we create that tier system where a loyal Marriott member becomes accustomed to this point system, kind of is using their points and working their way up in the point system to get to some of those luxury experiences and those sought after Ritz-Carlton travel experiences and luxury vacations. So that's something I still need to think about, gain more context about before I create a thoughtful landing page or homepage. But seeing this side by side, I think the information architecture of the redesign is much more improved in comparison to the current landing page. And I'd be excited to hear your thoughts on this. So thanks so much for listening in, and I'll stop sharing. Thank you.